updates today, talk about some changes that we're trying to make to accommodate everything that's going on in your world. I want to say thank you to all who submitted information about shout outs. Please keep that coming. We love to talk about and brag about the great things that are going on in the districts. And we're searching for other ways to get that good information out as well. All right, next slide. I'm going to turn it over to Sandy to talk about the childhood outcome summary form for a bit.
Hi, everybody. I just want to give you a quick little update about COAST. I know that's something that we all struggle with, and we get a lot of questions on COAST. So I kind of, before I start to talk about the entry and exit, just want to let you know that we have got a work group together, and this spring we're going to roll out some new training, guidance materials to go along with the assessments that are available for COAST. We'll roll out the training to the SPED directors and then to teachers after that. And we're hoping that it'll make a lot more sense. We'll have a better and more updated guidance document for COAST. So we're hoping that a lot of your questions, a lot of your teachers' questions will be answered in that. And how to do the COAST and how to assess students with COAST will make more sense once we do the trainings and show you kind of what we've been working on. But one of the big things we wanted to change right away, because it causes a lot of angst for districts, and we get a lot of questions on this piece. And we also have found when we go through the data that's submitted, a lot of districts either didn't do an entry or didn't do an exit and should have. And there's a lot of our questions revolve around this. So we have decided as a department that every student who's an EC student that's receiving special ed services, if they come into your district, when they start, they get an entry and an exit COAST. And that way you don't have to say, because there's always so many crazy scenarios when children are in and out or things happen. So every child gets an entry and every child gets an exit. And what will happen is we will then exclude anyone who doesn't meet the 6-month minimum. So you don't have to worry about that anymore. Just give every kid the entry and exit, and we'll do that other piece. So you won't have to worry about all of those kind of outlier situations that happen with kids that we wonder about. And then you don't have to worry about whether you should have given an exit or you did and you didn't, and so on. And so we're hoping that reduces a little bit of the stress and a little bit of the confusion over COAST. And then Carolyn's going to go a little bit more in depth about some of the data that'll be coming.
Okay, so to echo Sandy, we're going to have our first pre-check November 19th for all districts that want to participate in the pre-check. That will be, your submission will be November 19th. As a part of the pre-check process, you want to double check your entry and exit COAST ratings for all students. If a child is transferring into your district without an entry COAST, and they should have one, you will be responsible for completing that entry COAST F1, the students. Same situation if a student is leaving your district. The OSIS data team, we do not want you to have to worry about whether the child has been served 6 months or not. We will do the excluding on our side. As a matter of fact, in the data spreadsheet that is returned to you to make corrections, we will put in that spreadsheet, we will notate whether or not the student should be excluded for receiving less than 6 months of services. Once we send that information back to the districts will and should make the corrections within their system so that by the next pre-check submission, that information is correct. We will, on our side, have a tracking document for those unique situations so that if you're unable to make a change in your system, we're going to have a tracking sheet to notate those unique situations prior to reporting it back out to you on the second pre-check. Districts should make all corrections on the pre-checks prior to the next pre-check submission. Next slide, please. the findings or the results of the pre-checks, these are some of the common issues, once again, that we experience on our side. Students that should have entry and exit COSEF they don't have dates, or they're missing the rating scores. Students will have entry, no exit, or they have exit with no entry information, and it makes it hard for us to determine whether or not what the true outcome is for the student. So one of the things that we definitely want to make sure districts understand is that in order to get the COSEF ratings from another district within state, you must transfer the COS program the same way that you transfer the IEP. If you transfer the COS program within Enrich, that will allow entry, exit scores, anything on that student to appear as a part of that transfer on the student. This part, I definitely wanted to add inside of this presentation. Kindergarten students should, if the student is in kindergarten, they should have entry and exit dates as well as the ratings within the system. So by the end of the school year, any student that is in kindergarten should be included on your COS report for the current school year report. If you do not participate, if you participate in the pre-checks and you do not make the corrections prior to your June submission, you will receive a penalty of not valid and reliable data. Same to those districts who do not participate in the pre-checks and you submit your reports in June and there are errors on there, you will receive a penalty for not valid and reliable data. So what we're really trying to do is get in the habit of districts participating in the pre-checks, making those corrections prior to your June submission so that when you do submit in June, provided there are no system issues, your report will be correct when you submit in June. I think that concludes for the entry and exit COS. Looks like there's a question. Can you give an example of what we may be correcting? So if a correction on the COS would be a district that we receive the COSEF report and the student does not have entry or exit, and they should have. It will be a student that would be included in your report in June. And once again, in those submission that Andrea sends back to you with the corrections, there's a column in that a spreadsheet, if you scroll to the right, that tells you the age of the student as of June 30th to help you determine whether or not that student should be included in your report. So if we get the information and we go through the cleaning process and that student meets the age criteria and they're missing the entry and exit rating scores within the spreadsheet, then that would produce an error that would need to be corrected before your final submission. We can certainly talk about that, but once again, if we move the report, then that's going to collide with your indicators 11 and 12 report. So right now, the COS report is submitted at the end of June. But it's certain we can talk about those. I won't say no, but it's certainly a conversation that we can talk about. Is there a new logic to the compliance box? I don't know. I'll check the logic and get back with you, Joan. Okay, and I'm done, Becky.
Okay, thanks, Carolyn. In trying to accommodate what districts and schools are going through, we're going to make some changes to our meeting schedules. we're going to, from here on out, consolidate the monthly LEA call, this call, and the open office hours that occurs on the fourth Wednesday. We're going to combine those and move them to quarterly. So our next call, unless something strange, knock wood, happens that would require us to have a call more frequently, we will have our next call, LEA call, January the 26th from 1 to 2:30. We'll extend this call for 30 minutes. The first hour we'll spend doing updates, as we have, and then the last 30 minutes for anyone who wants to stay on who has questions that would be similar to open office hours questions. We'll do that at that point. The call after that will be April 27th, and I'll put all of this in an email to you. We would pick up calls again in August, October, January, April. Again, that's unless we need to increase the frequency if things were to change drastically. We are also going to pause the cohort meetings for now. The cohort managers are meeting with leadership team to try to brainstorm some ways to continue communicating well with cohorts. We know that it's kind of a catch-22. You don't want to miss any conversation, but you also have limited time in the day. And so several folks had expressed the concern that they felt like they had to call in to every meeting because sometimes based on a random question, something might get discussed at a cohort meeting that everybody would really need to know, and then that information may not be shared. So we're trying to come up with a different way to communicate that will be clearer, that will be accessible to everyone, and that will not require as much of your time. We probably right now are leaning toward maybe a monthly, I hate to call it a newsletter, but an update that could go out. There would be specific information related to any updates that are coming along between our quarterly meetings. There might be cohort specific information. But look for that. So we will send a cancellation for the LEA calls, the cohort meeting calls, large meetings, and the open office hours. So that gives you back a little bit of time. And then we will look at ways to continue communication. Your cohort manager is always there for you to reach out and if your cohort decides you want to get together informally, we certainly can arrange that as well. We just wanted to give you the option of some additional time in your day. We have developed a calendar in our office that we are trying to make sure we've got all the meetings that we are requiring from districts, whether it's data managers, cohorts, SIG, DISPRO, whatever it is, so that we have a better idea of what we are expecting of you. As you know, sometimes it's easy for cohort managers, for example, to say, well, we only meet once a month. What's the big deal? Well, then you add the data meetings who are also saying, we only meet once a month. Well, now you've got 2 hours. And then you add the LEA calls and there's another. And so we're aware, we're trying to be more aware and more conscious of what we're asking of districts. So, but again, we are always available to you to just reach out, questions, concerns, emails, calls, whatever is easier. Right, next slide. This may be Jill.
Yep, it's me again. Hi, everybody. All right, so self-assessment for 4, 9, and 10. Thank you, everybody, for being really patient. We were just trying to tweak things a little bit, and after seeing that some of our districts are going to probably have multiple areas, especially in 10, we wanted to kind of just make sure that our forms were streamlined and that we kind of took into account those that might have multiple areas to fill out assessments for. So we do have the self-assessment for indicator 4, and we have the self-assessment for indicators 9 and 10. And there's also record review forms, which you guys are familiar with, having to go through files and review them. They'll be sent out this Friday. And with that, the due date for them to return to us through the ADT system is Friday, November 12th. Just as a reminder, part 2 is the practices section, and we're going to make that optional this year. So there'll be one less section for you to have to look through and work through. But just know that this section will be required in May of 2022 and then going forward. So we'll keep that in there. So you'll do the policy and procedure piece, but you won't do the practices piece this year. There is going to also be an exemption form link included in the email, and Nicole will talk about that after me here in just a second to explain to you what that is, but that will also be included in the email for you. If you have any questions at all, please feel free to reach out to Jill, who's in charge of indicator 4, and you can reach out to me for indicators 9 and 10, and I'll put our emails in the chat box just so that you have them. We'd be really happy once you take a look at the forms to answer any questions or help you at all.
And here's the link for the exemptions request process. I will put the link in the chat once I'm done talking, because I can't do both at the same time. But it's really only for if you think an indicator is not applicable to you. A great example would be with DJJ. DJJ does not have an early childhood program, therefore indicators 6 and 7 would not apply to them, would not apply to them, and this is what they would use to request that those get pulled off of their LEA determinations. So it's got to contain adequate documentation and justification to support the request. And it's also got to be given during the LEA determination feedback. This isn't necessarily for individual student disputes. For instance, if you had a dispute about a student that was listed on indicator 10, that is not the purpose of this. This is for this indicator does not apply to my LEA. And then you get one chance for a dispute, and all decisions are final, and Becky will make that final decision. Any questions on that one?
Question.
Yes, ma'am.
Does that include, would we do this if we, if a particular group wasn't whatever the subset required size was, I think like 10 or more or 10 or less kids?
That should already come into play, but a time that you would do it is, for example, if you have an RTF in your district, I'm going to use Williamsburg as the example. They have a residential treatment facility in their district that happens to serve a lot of students with autism who are also white. So they are frequently identified as being significantly disproportionate or discrepancy based on that, except in that residential treatment facility, they have no control who goes into it or how that student was identified when they came into it. So that would be a time when you would do that.
Hey, this is Terry McGovern.
Hey, Terry.
Hey, Terry.
Hey, I was just trying to get clarification on that as well. So if an N size dropped below 10, for example, if you had, let's say hypothetically, 11 students with emotional disabilities who were white, and you now have looked at your data and you only have 6 of those students in your LEA, would that be, just for that area, would that be sufficient, or would we still do a review, that kind of thing?
In that situation, Terry, where there's where the N size or cell size is not big enough, we have to use an alternate risk ratio, and so it takes that into consideration. So
Okay.
if you have gotten notification that you have a significant discrepancy, disproportionate representation, or significant disproportionality, then the N and cell sizes have already been taken care of.
Okay.
This would only be where, and Nicole's example was good. The governor's schools are another example. They don't have anybody they don't accept students who are anything other than 11th and 12th graders. So they will never give an SC ready unless they change who they accept. They'll never have a C to B transition, those kinds of things. There won't be a lot of exemptions for a traditional district. But we did want to give districts a chance to, if you feel like there's a reason that, and again, it's not that the data aren't accurate, it's that you should not have to report on that particular indicator.
Okay, thank you for that. I appreciate it. Thanks.
And as far as the calculation, we're talking with some of this, we're talking about what comes out with your determination, and you always get 4 weeks or so, 4 to 6 weeks. When we send you your draft determination initially, you have 4 to 6 weeks then to make sure that your data say the same thing as ours, and we reconcile any differences during that time. So if, for example, you were to be identified as having significant discrepancy with your discipline data, but your data say when the calculation was made, or on the child count, that you only had 6 students in that group, then you could talk with us about whether or not that was a correct calculation, and we can walk you through it. Well, we can't. Kelvin and our data team can walk you through it.
Well, and I'm going totally off script here because I've been thinking about this recently. We have been talking for the last year about our LEA determinations changing. And it's officially official. Our LEA determinations, when we report on this school year that we're in, are going to look very different from when they are now. And we've been struggling with when to roll it out, when to discuss the changes with all of you, because there is so much going on. It's not at the top of your guys' list of being important. However, it's going to come up to a point when it's important. I'm going to use Wendy Stoudemire as the example. Like last summer, we put out a lot of videos on the SPP and changes that we were making and what the SOTA meant. And then she came back towards the end of this summer, at the beginning of the school year, and she said, well, these are all awesome. It would have been great if we could have paid more attention to them then. It didn't mean anything to me then. Well, now it means something, and I wish I'd have known these were here. How would you guys like those changes with LEA determinations rolled out? Because there's a whole lot of them, and they're coming. So would you prefer it in something that you can read, or would you prefer it in a video, or would you prefer a live discussion? The problem with a live discussion is we're trying to give you guys back as much time as we can. So if I could get a little bit of feedback about how you guys would like to receive changes to the LEA determinations in the SOTA process, it would be great. Something you can read with a Q&A document. Monica, part of what we were going to have read, excellent. Part of what we are going to attach with it, there's also an Excel spreadsheet that is something that you can, it will tell you exactly how everything is calculated and how you can calculate it yourself. We're even going to give you an Excel document so you can calculate, not every part of it, but some parts of it yourself. For example, we're not going to give you an Excel document on how to calculate the assessment portions and things like that. Okay, I'm getting a lot of something you can read. I will put together something you can read. I will send something you can read in an email. And then I will also do a quick video that you guys can access again with it. Okay, because I find that it's also kind of long enough that it's hard to cover all in one discussion. But I'm seeing a lot of something we can read, and I can also do a quick video. Unless I hear differently in this chat pod, I am not going to plan to talk about it in an LEA meeting. Okay, so we will, those are my questions. I guess I started off the Q&A. So those were my questions. What about y'all's questions?
And Nicole, Monica just said universal design for learning.
It's true.
It's just plain good teaching.
Okay, but like I said, the majority said read, and so we will definitely get that together. It'll be heavy on the reading video, but a little bit probably lighter on the video with all of the big details in the reading then.
Nicole, this is Wendy. Would it be appropriate to give it to us to read? Because I do need something to read and highlight and write my questions down. Then the video, and then maybe set up just a call if anybody needed further clarification. What I'd like to try to avoid is y'all getting 40 questions and it all end up being the same question.
Right. No, you're absolutely right. And that makes sense, because the other thing that we are going to have to do coming up, or that I would like to do coming up with you, all of you, is our SIP, our state performance plan, our state performance plan is changing as well. But the state systemic improvement plan and our SIMR are both changing, and we need to let you guys know how that's going to look. That's indicator 17. But that isn't going to impact your guys' LEA determination, so don't get scared on that part. It's just we're changing what we're doing, and it's kind of some really cool stuff, but we also have to get stakeholder feedback. So I need to do that as well, maybe very separate, put them in very separate things, but have a Q&A that would cover both.
That'd be fine. Yeah, I like the idea of not so many meetings, but the value of the conversations that I feel like a lot of us feel like we've gotten has been huge when we do have office hours. And I think that's one of the reasons so many people hate to miss something, is because you never know what might get discussed. So if we streamline it and do it less frequently, I think that's great. But I'm a little worried about quarterly being enough. So if we knew when something new rolled out, there was a date for Q&A for that specific topic, that may help.
Okay. All right, excellent.
Speaking of letting us know, I was recently on the call with Adult Ed. That Adult Ed was talking about SPED. Can y'all try to let us know when we're being talked about? I'm so glad I was in that meeting I'm so glad I heard it at the same time as my Adult Ed person.
Well, we will be glad to do that when we know.
I get it.
First I've heard. The good news is, however, Adult Ed is now in our division with the latest reorganization. That office is now part of our division, whatever the name is. And so I'll reach out to Mike King, the director, and ask that we be an offer, like we always do, to be part of any time they talk about special ed, but at least ask them to run by what they're going to say. Was anything said that raised concerns, Wendy?
No, honestly,
Okay.
Probably I learned more about one thing that I was being too black and white about, but I'm okay with that. So no, for me, it was fine. I do know some other districts, there was talk about, they can go to the career center. We have to do transportation. I think we all know that, but we didn't. I think the concern was that it was said in such a way that it was carte blanche, and just after the fact, you can let us know. And we just feel like we need to be at the table.
Okay. Yeah. And anytime you hear something from another office about SPED, and I'll pick on Medicaid, anytime you hear something about SPED from another office, like if you were in a Medicaid training and they said something that runs contrary to what you know or what we've said, please reach out to us. We want to make sure, and Medicaid again is a great example. We have developed a great collaboration with the Medicaid office. We're working hard to educate them as far as IDEA requirements. We've learned a lot about Medicaid and state level Medicaid requirements. So anytime you hear anything that sounds off, let us know, and so that we can reach out to the other office.
Okay, thank you.
Other questions, concerns at this point?
Well, and we do have some time left in our time. Please feel free to think of this as like the open office hours. If you have questions about anything, please feel free to ask.
Hi, Becky. This is Elizabeth in Saluda.
Hey, Elizabeth.
Is there a parent survey for the annual reviews in an individualized service plan?
For individual service plans for parentally placed private school children, the regs are silent other than to say they should be done in a similar manner to IEP. So one would assume at least annually.
Because the survey's not populating with the service plan is why I'm asking.
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, so for indicator 8?
Yes.
No, we don't have to, because we are asking for indicator 8 if parents report involvement in the IEP process, and students that are parentally placed private school don't have a right to FAPE, they have a right to equitable services, and that's where the services plan comes in rather than an IEP.
Okay, thank you. That will clarify for my speech teacher that serves at a private school.
Yep. The only time that would not be true is if the district had placed the child in the private school, in which case you'd have an IEP anyway for that child. Other questions?
Becky, there's a question in the chat about the Enrich reports and when will they be updated. As it stands, I sent an email on yesterday. I do not have an answer as to when they will have the issue resolved for indicator 12 with the one district. As soon as that is resolved, we can get the reports open for the current school year.
Please know that we will not hold any district, we will not penalize any district for an Enrich issue. We seem to, and maybe it's just patience and tolerance is kind of worn thin in a pandemic, but we seem to have had a good many issues with Enrich. But please know that no district will be penalized for late data or inaccurate data when it's an Enrich issue. Now, if it's user error and dates are entered wrong, that's different. But if this is an Enrich issue, you'll not be penalized.
And then Becky, also Wendy Height asks, when will we know about ARP funds and when they're available?
Michelle, are you on?
I am. Good afternoon. ARP funds have been loaded into GAPS, but unfortunately, there are some technical issues. My understanding from our lead grants accountant this morning is that the roles were the problem with that, and that roles were being established or reestablished. with the ARP funds. So I believe that the 611 ARP funds you should be able to see those, and then that we're still working on the preschool funds, but we're hoping to have that resolved quickly, but we're kind of at the mercy of our IT department and getting that corrected.
All right, any other questions? All right. I hope everybody has a good rest of the week, that you are staying as safe and healthy and sane as possible, knowing that sane is a relative term in this day and age. As always, please reach out to any of us with questions, concerns. If you think of something that would make things work better, please share it. We are always open to new ideas, to a better way of doing things. I hope everybody has a good rest of the week. Thanks.